Hello and welcome to the second week of our course. In this week we're going to look at the relationship between diet and heart disease. In this section we're going to look at the therapeutic lifestyle chain, or what sometimes is referred to as the TLC diet. The TLC diet was invented by or is promoted by the National Institutes of Health's National Cholesterol Education Program. So it's a program to help promote healthy diet and lifestyle choices that in turn will lower cholesterol levels, which in turn helps to reduce heart disease risk. So there are two ways traditionally that have been employed in order to lower cholesterol levels. You can go to the medication route to help bring cholesterol levels down, or the lifestyle route. Lifestyle does include diet and exercise. And most healthcare practitioners, physicians, nurse practitioners would advocate for some sort of combination of the two. For the sake of this nutrition class, we're going to focus on the dietary components of TLC. What's the overall end result? What's the desirable outcome? Of course, we want to reduce cardiovascular disease risk, but if we're looking at objective measurements, we want to try to get the lipid profile to look somewhat reflective of what you see here on the slide. Total cholesterol should be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter. We want LDL levels below 100, HDL greater than or equal to 60, and triglycerides less than 150. Now, dependent upon what part of the world you live in, where you work, you might have different levels. These are the United States recommendations. And it's also important to note that the TLC approach that's part of the National Cholesterol Education Program is also a dietary and lifestyle approach that is endorsed by the American Heart Association. So who has high cholesterol and what can you do about it? By the time you're age 20, your cholesterol is starting to go up, and it continues to go up until you're about age 60 or 65. Before age 50, men tend to have higher cholesterol levels than do women. But after age 50, the opposite happens. And that's because women's LDL levels tend to rise with menopause. So what can you do about your cholesterol levels? And what increases risk? We have risk factors that we call non-modifiable and risk factors that we call modifiable. The non-modifiable ones are things that you can't do anything about. You can't do anything about your genetic background or heredity. You can't do anything about your age. Can't do anything about your gender. The older you get, your cholesterol levels go up, and I explained the difference between male and female levels. But what you can do something about are the modifiable risk factors. You can make positive changes in your diet, you can reduce being overweight, and you can exercise more to help counteract the negative impact of physical inactivity. Let's look at the first modifiable risk factor, overweight. What's so bad about being overweight? In some conditions, being overweight is protective. And there are certainly overweight people who are very healthy. We say they're metabolically fit. If you've got good cholesterol, good blood sugar, good blood pressure, who cares if you're a little overweight? Just like if you're underweight or of a healthy weight, you can be very unhealthy internally. So we're not saying that your weight is exactly the same thing as your health, and they don't always match up that way. But we do know that overweight people in the excess weight tends to raise their LDL cholesterol levels, raise their triglyceride levels, lower their good cholesterol, their HDL levels, and that losing weight has been shown to help lower LDL and triglycerides and to increase HDL. So if 2/3 of the United States population is overweight or obese, and if heart disease is the #1 killer of Americans, we need to put these things together to realize that being overweight and obese is to some degree increasing cardiovascular disease risk. How about physical inactivity? This is another risk factor that you can modify. We know that being physically inactive or leading a sedentary lifestyle contributes to overweight, raises your bad cholesterol, lowers your good cholesterol, and that if you engage in regular physical activity, you can turn the tide on that. You can increase your good cholesterol, reduce your triglycerides, and losing weight in turn helps to lower your bad cholesterol levels. Diet is the modifiable risk factor with which we'll focus on the most in this course. There are three primary components to the diet that is part of the therapeutic lifestyle change. The three areas are saturated fat, trans fat, and cholesterol. Saturated fats are those fats that you find primarily in full-fat dairy and animal products. They tend to be solid at room temperature. They raise your bad cholesterol levels. Trans fats are the ones that are found in a lot of shelf-stable baked goods, kind of junk foods like chocolate and different sorts of pies and pastry. They also raise your LDL levels. And trans fats are the same as hydrogenated fats. Cholesterol is found only in animal foods and to some degree plays a lesser role on your cholesterol levels, but still does play a role. And that's confusing for some people. They think, oh, if I have high cholesterol levels, I should just stop eating cholesterol. But that's not the case. It's actually the saturated and trans fats in your diet that will more readily raise your LDL levels than will the cholesterol in your diet. So we kind of have to look at the whole thing, your diet as it pertains to your saturated fat, trans fat, and to a lesser degree, your cholesterol levels. So what is the TLC diet? There's some pretty objective measurements. The goal of the TLC diet is to significantly reduce saturated fat. Less than 7% of your calories should come from saturated fat. And keep in mind that saturated fat, because it's a type of fat, has 9 calories per gram. Fat should be 25 to 35% of your calories. Mention that a heart-healthy diet is one that's approximately 30% of calories from fat or less. Cholesterol should be under 200 milligrams per day. Sodium, 2,400 milligrams per day. And then the calories that you eat should provide just enough calories to help you reach or to maintain a healthy weight. You can go online to the link that's pictured here and actually calculate your own needs based on some personal data to see how these numbers play out for you. So does the TLC diet work? Well, there's a good amount of data that's showing that there is reduction in your LDL from the TLC diet, and that the combination of the different components of the diet can actually reduce your LDL levels to a degree that compares very well with many of the cholesterol-lowering drugs. So you might say, in other words, that this is as powerful at lowering your LDL levels as are some very expensive medication regimens. Saturated fat. If you cut your saturated fat down to 7% of your calories or less, you see 8 to 10% reduction in LDL. For your dietary cholesterol, if you can keep it to 200 milligrams a day or less, you get a 3 to 5% reduction in LDL. Losing 10 pounds if you're overweight can equate to a 5 to 8% reduction in your LDL. Adding 5 to 10 grams of soluble fiber a day further decreases your LDL by 3 to 5%. And then the inclusion of plant stanols and plant sterols, adding about 2 grams a day, reduces the LDL level by 5 to 15. And so overall, if you add that up, employing these therapeutic lifestyle changes can lower your LDL by roughly 20 to 30%. Let's do an application, because there's kind of a lot of numbers. How do we actually use these numbers to help an individual design a meal plan to lower their LDL or their total cholesterol levels? Let's take our sample individual named Barry. He is following an 1,800 calorie per day meal plan. He's trying to lose a little weight because he's overweight. How many grams of saturated fat per day should he be having if he's following the therapeutic lifestyle change? Here's the solution to Barry's example. The therapeutic lifestyle change diet says you should get no more than 7% of your calories from saturated fat. So 7% of 1,800 calories is 126 calories from saturated fat. The question asks you not about the calories, but rather about the grams of saturated fat that Barry should be eating. All fat has 9 calories per gram, so if you divide 126 by 9, you're going to get the answer of roughly 14 grams of saturated fat. So if Barry's going to a restaurant for breakfast and he looks at the menu and sees that there's 20 grams of saturated fat in that breakfast, that's obviously not going to be the healthiest choice for him, because in the whole day, he really only should be consuming about 14 grams of saturated fat max per day. So what does 14 grams of saturated fat look like? It's roughly, if you had to put it in food terms, 3 tablespoons of lard, 2.5 ounces of cheddar cheese, 6 ounces of ground beef, or 2 tablespoons of butter. There's not a lot of leeway in the TLC diet to eat a lot of high-fat dairy or high-fat meat products. One of the best ways to bring down your saturated fat in your diet is to reduce the amount of dairy and to reduce or possibly even eliminate the amount of animal fat in your diet. Let's do another application. People ask about eggs all the time when it comes to cholesterol. You'll say, are eggs good for me? Well, depends. What's your situation? That's a loaded question. Let's say we have a sample woman named Rita, and she is following the TLC diet in order to reduce her cholesterol. She has eliminated most animal products, but she loves eggs. She wants to eat eggs and wants to know, is that something that fits in with the TLC diet? Now, for your information, one egg has roughly 186 milligrams of cholesterol. So in order to keep in line with the TLC guidelines, how many eggs per week can Rita have if she has almost no other sources of cholesterol in her diet? Here's Rita. Rita can have at most 7 eggs. The TLC diet says you should have about 200 milligrams of cholesterol per day on average. If an egg is 186, which is close to 200, it's about an egg a week. So if Rita sits down to 3 eggs a day every day of the week, she's obviously going to triple the amount of cholesterol that she should be having in her diet. But if most of the week she goes without eggs, and then on the weekend she wants to have 2 or 3 eggs a day, that's perfectly fine. So there's really no cut and dry answer. Are eggs good for her? They're not bad for her in very high amounts, and they're perfectly fine for her in moderate amounts. Interestingly enough, eggs on average have 14% less cholesterol and 64% more vitamin D in 2010, the last time the USDA did an analysis, as compared to the previous time where they did it in 2002. So if you look at older data or older nutrition recommendations, you might have seen, oh, well, you shouldn't eat eggs because they're quite high in cholesterol. We have better tests that are more sensitive and more specific now, so we can see that the average egg, a medium-sized egg, has just under 200 milligrams of cholesterol a day. So that's what we're aiming for. Rita can have her eggs. Spread it out over the week, though. The last concept I want to touch on is the role of niacin for cholesterol. Niacin is a B vitamin and a water-soluble vitamin. Nicotinic acid is the form that sometimes people take in order to help reduce their cholesterol levels. This is available over the counter, although it should be taken under supervision of a qualified healthcare professional. It helps improve all of your lipoproteins, your total cholesterol, your LDL, your triglycerides, and your HDL. But if some people take it in high doses, it has been shown to clinically reduce cholesterol levels. One of the problems, though, is that there are certain types of niacin, if taken in very high doses, that can cause what's called niacin flush. So it's this flushing or heating sensation that people get sometimes on their cheek, their neck, maybe the upper part of their chest, or even their shoulders or their arms. The amount that an individual would take to lower the cholesterol is much, much higher than the average person would eat in their diet. So basically, 1 to 3 gram dose of niacin would be about 50 to 150 times the amount that you would find in a standard multivitamin. So for people who are particularly sensitive to this, they're advised to find other forms of niacin. You can actually buy no-flush niacin, but one of the problems with this is that it wouldn't have the ability to lower your cholesterol because it doesn't contain any free nicotinic acid. So some of those products are a little bit misleading if they say it's niacin without the flush, because you're also not going to be getting the cholesterol-lowering benefits. How can you avoid the flushing? Well, you're advised, if you do take high doses of niacin for your cholesterol, to take an extended release product, to take it with food, preferably after dinner or as a bedtime snack, to avoid hot drinks and alcohol when you take niacin, or to consider taking aspirin before the meal that you take with the niacin. But again, because it's something that's used in pretty high doses, it is wise to consult a healthcare professional before you start incorporating this into your cholesterol-lowering regimen. If you're interested in learning more, here's a couple of good websites that I recommend that can give you more information about the TLC diet to lower cholesterol.